What's happening, big dogs? Back again this week for Market Watch Mondays. I'm recording this Sunday night. You'll be seeing it tomorrow in the AM, 5 a.m. to be exact, because we like to hit you with the early content for all those of you who don't sleep. Team No Sleep. We're going to cover some stuff today, but before we do that, I'm going to hit that intro.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, this week, Market Watch Monday, I want to cover a couple of things, but the first thing is going to be the Rams backfield. And the reason I want to cover it is because there's a lot of news and a lot of noise that's going on because of Hard Knocks. Obviously, the first couple episodes have aired on HBO. If you don't watch HBO, good, because you're not going to get much informative stuff from fantasy out of it, but it is pretty entertaining. But I think people are definitely kind of reaching a little bit here. And the battle, again, it comes back to Darrell Henderson versus Cam Akers. And you know, big dogs, we love Cam Akers. That's our dude. And I think there's a lot of hype that came up for Darrell Henderson in the offseason. First, with all the coach speak about how, it's going to be a running back by committee. We're going to see how it goes. Everyone's going to get their opportunity. And we've already covered that. That's all bogus, in my opinion, especially that early on in the offseason. It just doesn't make any sense for a coach to actually write off their veteran room. He's going to say everyone's valuable because the second you say that, hey, like we brought in young guys to replace you, you kind of lose that veteran presence and you lose that locker room. So there's literally no incentive for coaches to say something like that. But you just got to go back again to, I think, especially this year more than others, because of the lack of like preseason, because of the lack of like real playing time and like actual data points where you can actually point to it and say like, hey, like this shows that this guy's going to get the first team reps, or this shows that this guy's going to get the majority of the touches. In the absence of that, you kind of just got to go back to the actions and really, really pin down the actions that matter. And in terms of the actions, I think what the Rams have done already speaks louder than anything Sean McVay says. It speaks louder than any episode of Hard Knocks. For those of you that didn't see it, apparently Darrell Henderson was the first one on the field and got some of those first team reps. So now it's got people on Twitter all hyped up about how Darrell Henderson is going to be that, first running back, and, Cam Akers is going to be what we thought going to be. First of all, that's completely bogus. Second of all, like you got to go back to draft capital, right? Like the Rams had so many holes in their teams, and for whatever reason, it was a bad decision, but they did it. They chose to invest a second round pick in Cam Akers. Cam Akers, who has all the talent in the world and is going to be someone who's raw and takes time to transition. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's going to come out here and just be 80% workhorse right off the bat. That's not going to happen. There is going to be a mix of things, but I think it's getting blown way over proportion where people actually think Darrell Henderson has a legitimate chance of being a lead running back, or at least even splitting touches with Cam Akers, which look, anything's possible. Of course, it's fantasy football, but the realm of likelihood of that happening, I'd put at probably lower than Noah cutting his hair before next week. Okay. So, and we all know how much Noah loves his locks, and that's not going anywhere. And just like that, Cam Akers' role is not going anywhere. I'm honestly, you need to capitalize off the hype of all this Hard Knock stuff and all these first team reps and all the noise, like basically all the noise that normally we wouldn't really pay as much attention to because we'd have like real preseason data to go off of. Everyone is like magnified, because if one person tweets it, another person tweets it to fit the narrative, then all the Darrell Henderson truthers come out and tweet it, and it's honestly, it's nonsense. And I would definitely fade that noise. That's an instance where I think Darrell Henderson's value is going to probably get propped up by some of this first team rep and, Hard Knocks nonsense. But the fundamental value of Darrell Henderson is the same. And Darrell Henderson is not going to be, in my opinion, a fantasy viable running back unless Cam Akers goes down. And even if Cam Akers goes down, I think he's honestly going to be split in the backfield with Malcolm Brown anyway. So that is not someone that I'm investing in. It's not someone that I'm buying in. If you have any shares of Darrell Henderson, I would highly recommend you sell it. If you can get a 2021 second for him, that is an immediate cash. If you can get, honestly, if you can use them to like as an add-on to upgrade, I would definitely do that. And in that same vein, if you can buy Cam Akers for cheap anywhere, I would do it. And if you could do it now, you could do it, maybe after the first week of the season, where Darrell Henderson, is the first one on the field. But honestly, that means nothing to me. Like I really want to project and care about who gets the majority of the touches. And for me, over the course of the season, I just honestly don't see it. Like Darrell Henderson had the opportunity last year to relieve Todd Gurley and to kind of like, plant his flag and be that second guy, and he could not beat out quintessential Jag Malcolm Brown. So I think that really tells you all you need to know. And he basically came out himself and said he struggled with that offense. And look, maybe he improved, maybe he's good. I'm not sure, but he's an undersized guy to begin with, and there's a reason why they drafted Cam Akers. So again, it just goes back to like it really goes back to stock market, right? Like even when you're investing in the stock market, there's going to be news, there's going to be random noise throughout the course of holding that investment. But it's really up to you to like decipher what's a red herring and what's fake news versus what's actually news that drives underlying fundamental value of an investment. And in this case, like this is all hype. This is not something to really base decisions off of. I wouldn't do it. I'm still investing in Cam Akers. If I can get him for cheaper now, good, because this guy is going to be a stud in my opinion. And if we just go back to the fundamentals of what the Rams did, what they showed us was they do not believe in Darrell Henderson. They do not believe in Malcolm Brown. They obviously don't believe in Todd Gurley because he's gone from the team. And then when the chips were on the table, they pushed it all in on Cam Akers. And I think that's really the data point that I'm going to go back on. I'm going to fade all the noise about these, potential first team reps and all the noise about the hard knocks, about Darrell Henderson, about running back by committee, about Sean McVay saying everyone has a chance. Like it's all fluff, and it's what the coaches have to say. So there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not something that you should really be placing your chips on and putting and acting on, to be honest. And then the second one I want to talk about is actually a player who we've been really high on in at Big Dogs, and even before the draft, and it's Bryan Edwards, and he's someone that we've loved just because of his analytical profile. And I'll throw that up on the screen a little bit, but he has a 100th percentile breakout. He broke out as a 17-year-old in college in the SEC, which obviously is tough to do in any conference, but to step on the field as a freshman and immediately dominate is something that's rare, especially for his age. And his stock kind of took a hit, right? Because he was injured, he couldn't participate at the combine for whatever reason. And then he ended up going to the Raiders in the third round, which honestly is still not a kiss of death because day two capital is still pretty solid. All the hype was on Ruggs after the draft, right? Because he was a first round draft capital and everyone loved his speed. He was a speedster, he was a burner, and like all that speed kills type stuff that people love to drive home. And he kind of like fell to the wayside a little bit. And now like training camp has started and we're starting to see some buzz on Bryan Edwards and all the people coming out of the woodworks. And there's obviously still the Henry Ruggs hive, but I think over this past week, we've seen a lot more like Bryan Edwards news about how, Derek Carr says he's Devontae Adams. I mean, look, I get it. Derek Carr played with Devontae Adams, but you got to like take those hyperbole comps with a grain of salt because, he's his teammate. So he's obviously going to want to pump him up. And then you're talking about, I think most recently is about how Bryan Edwards took first team reps. And then I saw a bunch of retweets on my timeline being like, hey, this is the wide receiver one. Like this is the wide receiver one of the Raiders. And look, I actually agree. Like I think long term the answer is Bryan Edwards for me personally, but you can't let the type of misinformation like throw you off because if you actually read the article from Roto World, which basically all they do now is clickbait season, the other guys taking first team reps were like Nelson Aguilar. And we all know Nelson Aguilar is not going to be taking first team reps in a real game ahead of guys like Henry Ruggs, who they invested a first round pick in, or like, even Terrell Williams. And honestly, like, it's just like it's really hard to decipher all the information because everyone's just trying to get clicks right now. So I would caution against reading headlines and not digging deep into the actual article itself. Super dangerous to get misled because that's like Roto World's bread and butter. They like, I don't even know how they get sign off for some of these articles. Like it's probably like, it's pretty bad, pretty bad journalism just in terms of like what they're sacrificing in terms of the integrity of reporting versus like, the clickbait that they want to have. And I get it. Look, you want to get eyeballs, but it's up to you and it's up to us to kind of decipher through and, figure out what's real and what's not. And as much as I love Bryan Edwards, like you need to like really temper expectations based on like clickbait headlines. I still think he's the guy to own there long term, but I'm not expecting Bryan Edwards to come out and have like 1,000-yard season, which is what Twitter is making it seem like. Like I love the player, I love the talent, I love the profile, and I even really like the landing spot. But training camp hype videos where they're playing in shorts and a t-shirt without pads and Roto World blurbs is not a reason to increase the price. So I've already had him third tier of my wide receivers because I have, CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Reagor are one, and I got Justin Jefferson, Jerry Jeudy as two, and then got T. Higgins, LaVisca, and Edwards and Ruggs in that like next tier. So he's gonna stay in that tier for me. I'm not moving him up anywhere. He's gonna stay there. He's basically proving what I thought he would be, but like there's really no evidence until they actually step on the field. So definitely avoid that type of overreaction from road world blurbs for first team reps and depth charts and all this nonsense. Where like right now in at this time, and especially this season where we don't have preseason where you can actually look at who's running with the first teams, like the first team definition is kind of like a gray area. Like you really want to see them play with like real starters, and we all know that Nelson Aguilar is not a real starter, right? So I think Edwards is going to have playing time. I think he's going to make an impact. But you just really need to be careful about being carried away with like that Twitter wave. And if that wave keeps going and rising, I'm not against exploring some sell options on the player. You know, similar to what we talked about with Antonio Gibson, I've actually sold a couple shares of him already, even though we did like the player. But you know, cashing on that profit and boosting your long-term value from a dynasty perspective is always a perspective I'm looking to pursue. So keep an eye on Bryan Edwards. I don't think any value increase, I guess, from this news is really warranted because to me his fundamental value hasn't changed. We haven't seen what's been on the field, but if that gap between what his perceived value is and what we think his underlying value is continues to widen, that's when you can kind of explore some opportunities. And when that gets too crazy, when you're getting offers like maybe like Bryan Edwards for like Laviska Shenault plus a second, or Bryan Edwards for Henry Ruggs plus a second, or Bryan Edwards for T Higgins plus a second. Those are some really good deals that you should definitely explore based on that hype, because again, when you're within the same tier of player and you can add extra picks, that's always gravy. So again, just I'm here to try and help you guys waver through those, Twitter hype machine, Twitter hive mind streets, and telling you to like showing you what you should look out for so that hopefully, you don't get swept up with all the hype. And you got to make sure just go back and see what the teams did from an action perspective and see what if that lines up with what they're saying. And if there are conflicts between what they're saying and what they're doing, like in the instance of the Rams and with all this hard knock nonsense, to fade that information. But when if their actions and their words line up, then you definitely have some more legs to run on, similar to like how the situation with the Rojo, for example, where we know that he's a starter, like Bruce Arians says he's a starter, and everything they're saying and acting on kind of lines up a little bit more. So look for stuff like that, and definitely always fade the Twitter sheep hive mind, because I promise you, like, that is the easiest way to profit in Dynasty. And hopefully these segments help you. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll be back again next week with another one. And make sure you tune in to this week's BBB episode, narrative, 5 Fact Fridays, and the slate of content that we have for you guys this week. Make sure you join the Discord. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Me Up with 2Ps. Follow my co-host Noah at FB God. Follow Nick, the rest of the BDG crew, and make sure you subscribe and hit that thumbs up because it really helps us, and we appreciate it.